My name is Rachel, and I am 35 years old. Last Wednesday fundamentally altered my entire existence when I discovered I had won $52 million in the state lottery. My fingers trembled uncontrollably as I stared at those 6 perfectly aligned numbers on my ticket. After the initial wave of disbelief subsided, an unexpected thought crystallized in my mind. I would tell absolutely no one about this windfall. You see, I have an extraordinarily complex relationship with my family regarding financial matters. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Before I tell you about this life-changing decision, hit like and subscribe to hear more authentic stories about family loyalty and betrayal that might transform how you perceive your own relationships. Before that fateful Wednesday, my existence was painfully mundane. I worked as a tax advisor at a medium-sized accounting firm in Denver, earning just enough to maintain a comfortable lifestyle, but never sufficient to feel genuinely secure about my future. My apartment was a modest 1-bedroom unit on the periphery of downtown, nothing extraordinary, but it belonged to me. Every morning, I would rise at 6:30, prepare my coffee, and commence my day with the perpetual burden of bills and deadlines weighing heavily upon my shoulders. The tax advisory profession was exceptionally demanding, with 70-hour work weeks becoming standard rather than the exception, particularly during tax season. My supervisor Richard possessed an infuriating habit of claiming complete credit for my innovative strategies during meetings with high-profile clients. My colleague Stephen consistently departed early, leaving me to handle his workload, yet somehow always managed to receive the recognition I deserved. My family dynamics were complicated beyond measure. My parents, Robert and Susan, divorced when I reached 15, and both remarried within 3 years. My father Robert, a skilled electrician, married Patricia, a hairstylist with extravagant tastes that consistently exceeded their income. My mother Susan found love with David, a successful contractor who possessed considerably more wealth than my father, but maintained strict control over every penny. I have 2 brothers who could not be more different. My younger brother Kevin is 32 and has perpetually been the golden child. He graduated summa cum laude from a prestigious university, married Sarah, a successful dental hygienist, and currently resides in a magnificent house in the affluent suburbs with their 3 seemingly perfect children who excel at everything they attempt. Then there is my older brother Tyler, 37, who despite possessing considerable charm and intelligence, has never figured out his life's direction. He continuously jumps from one job to another, from one relationship to the next, and has transformed borrowing money from family members into a sophisticated art form. The pattern remained identical: desperate phone call, emotional plea, solemn promise to repay, followed by complete silence until the next crisis. Extended family members were equally complicated. My Aunt Margaret, my mother's younger sister, represented perhaps the only genuinely authentic person within our family circle. Despite living paycheck to paycheck as a registered nurse, she consistently found ways to appear when circumstances truly mattered. She drove an ancient Toyota that produced concerning noises, lived in a cramped apartment filled with medical journals and houseplants, and never complained about her modest circumstances. In stark contrast stood my Aunt Barbara, my father's older sister, who had married into considerable wealth and never let anyone forget her elevated status. She spent every holiday criticizing everyone's life choices and delivering passive-aggressive comments about my career, apartment, and perpetually single status. My cousin Brian, her spoiled son, had inherited her entitlement but possessed none of her financial success, and harbored a serious gambling addiction that the family pretended not to notice. My history with providing financial assistance to family members had left me deeply cynical. When Tyler desperately needed $6,000 for a business venture 2 years ago, I emptied my savings to help him, only to discover months later that he had never started the business and used the money for gambling debts. When Kevin needed help with wedding costs, I charged $3,000 to my credit card with his promise to repay after the honeymoon. For years later, I remained waiting. When my father needed a loan to repair his truck after an accident, I sent every available dollar, only to see photos of him and Patricia vacationing in Las Vegas the following month. The only person who knew the full extent of these betrayals was my best friend Jennifer. We had met in college, and unlike most relationships in my life, ours had remained constant. Jennifer worked as a physical therapist, understood struggle, and never judged my complicated family feelings. Purchasing lottery tickets represented my singular small indulgence, a weekly ritual that my family mocked relentlessly. Every Friday, I would stop at the corner store and spend $12 on tickets. My mother called it a tax on people who cannot do math. My brother Tyler joked that I should just give him the money directly. My father lectured me about probability and statistics. But there was something hopeful about those tickets, a tiny chance at freedom I could not abandon. I possessed dreams, naturally. I yearned to travel extensively, to witness places beyond the Rocky Mountains. I wanted to return to school, perhaps, pursuing a master's degree in something that genuinely ignited my passion. I desperately wanted sufficient savings that an unexpected car repair would not send me into financial panic. However, these dreams appeared increasingly distant as I approached my mid-30s, still paying off student loans and carrying credit card debt that never diminished despite careful budgeting. Each month represented a delicate balancing act involving bills, groceries, and the occasional dinner out with Jennifer. I clipped coupons, compared prices, and possessed encyclopedic knowledge of which store offered the best deals. I drove an 8-year-old Honda Civic that made worrying noises when it rained, but replacing it remained financially impossible. This was my existence before everything changed. Ordinary, frequently difficult, occasionally lonely, but stable in its own way. I had no idea that a single piece of paper was about to upend everything I understood about myself and the people I called family. The day I purchased the winning ticket began as particularly stressful. I had just completed a grueling week where Richard had again claimed credit for my tax strategy that saved a major client thousands. I stopped at Frank's Corner Market as I did every Friday, but this time with a variation in my routine. "You look exhausted, Rachel," Frank called out as I entered. Frank was a kind older gentleman who had owned the store for over 25 years. He knew every regular customer by name and always offered friendly encouragement. "Thanks for noticing," I replied wearily. "The usual, please, and perhaps 2 extra for good luck." "Rough week? Maybe today your luck changes," he said with an encouraging wink as he handed me my tickets. Instead of my typical quick pick, I decided impulsively to choose my own numbers. I selected my birth month and day, 7 and 23, my mother's birthday 14, my father's birthday 9, Margaret's birthday 18, and Jennifer's birthday 31. 6 numbers representing the most significant people in my life, including those who had disappointed me. That evening, I ordered takeout from my favorite Chinese restaurant, opened a bottle of wine Jennifer had given me, and settled in for a quiet night alone. The lottery drawing was at 8:15 p.m., but I barely paid attention as I scrolled through social media, observing posts from acquaintances enjoying far more exciting lives. At 9 o'clock, I remembered the tickets and lazily retrieved my phone to check the numbers, expecting nothing as usual. The first number matched, 7. I smiled slightly. The second matched, 23. My heart rate accelerated. Third number, 14. Fourth, 9. By now, my palms were sweating. Fifth number, 18. I held my breath. Sixth and final number, 31, *. I stared at my phone for what felt like eternity. This could not be right. I checked repeatedly, convinced I was hallucinating. I turned on the television and found the recording of the live drawing. I watched in amazement as each number appeared consecutively. My hands trembled so violently I dropped the remote. "No way," I whispered to the empty apartment. "This cannot be happening." According to the lottery website, I was the sole winner of $52 million. After taxes, approximately $31 million, an unfathomable sum for someone excited earlier about a 15% discount coupon for laundry detergent. I did not sleep that entire night. Instead, I researched lottery winners online, seeking guidance. What I discovered was disturbing: countless stories of winners whose lives fell apart after their windfall. Families torn apart by greed. Friends materializing with sob stories and outstretched hands. Winners bankrupt within 5 years, more miserable than before. One article called the lottery the quickest path to losing everything you care about. As the sun rose, I made my decision. I would claim the money through proper legal channels, but tell absolutely no one. Not my parents, not my brothers, not even Jennifer. I needed time to process this, to understand what this money would mean. Before everyone else tried to dictate what I should do with it, that morning, I called in sick for the first time in 2 years and scheduled an appointment with Thomas, an attorney specializing in financial planning. His office was in a downtown high-rise, and as I sat in the elegant waiting room wearing ordinary clothes, clutching my purse with the winning ticket, I felt like an imposter. "Miss Rachel," Thomas greeted me professionally. He appeared to be in his 50s, with graying hair and intelligent eyes behind expensive glasses. "What can I help you with today?" I took a deep breath and placed the ticket on his desk. "I need to know how to claim this without anyone discovering my identity." His eyes widened briefly as he examined the ticket. Then he nodded professionally. "I see. Well, you have come to the right place." Over the next 3 hours, Thomas explained every available option. In our state, lottery winners could claim prizes through trusts that would keep their identities private. He outlined the process of establishing a blind trust, how taxes would work, and the importance of assembling financial advisors to manage such a large sum. "The biggest mistake winners make," he told me seriously, "is telling too many people. Too quickly. Once that happens, there is no going back. I nodded, relieved my instinct was correct. I want to do this right. I do not want this money to ruin my life. Over the next 3 weeks, I worked with Thomas to establish the trust, claim the winnings, and set up investment accounts. We created a comprehensive financial plan ensuring I would never worry about money again. The money was real now, sitting in accounts under my control, yet my daily life remained unchanged. I continued going to work, still complained about bills with coworkers, still drove my old Honda Civic. The secrecy was weighing on me. I found myself wondering about my family. Would they be happy for me if they knew? Would they respect my boundaries, or would they see me as nothing more than a walking ATM? These questions haunted me, and gradually an idea formed. What if there was a way to discover how my family would react to my wealth without revealing it? What if I could test their character before deciding who deserved to share my secret? The plan crystallized one night as I lay awake. I would create a scenario where I desperately needed financial help. I would approach each family member with the same story and see who would help without any prospect of gaining anything in return. The following day, I met with Thomas again to ensure my finances were secure before proceeding. Everything is in order, Rachel, Thomas assured me. Your financial future is secure. You could stop working tomorrow if you wanted. The thought was tempting, but I knew sudden lifestyle changes would raise questions. I think I will continue at my job for now, I replied. At least until I figure some things out. That evening, I invited Jennifer over for dinner. As we sat on my balcony with wine, I decided to share part of my plan. I am thinking about conducting an experiment with my family, I began carefully. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. What kind of experiment? I took a deep breath. I am going to tell them I lost my job and need financial help. Just to see who actually cares enough to help when I need it. Jennifer's expression shifted to concern. Rachel, that seems manipulative. Why would you do that? Because I am tired of being the only one who helps when others need it, I said. I want to know who would be there for me if the tables were turned. But lying to test people? That does not sound like you. Jennifer set down her wine glass. Why not just ask them directly how they feel about you? I laughed bitterly. Right? Because my family is so great at honest conversations. You know how they are, Jennifer. You have seen how they treat me. Still, this feels wrong. What are you trying to prove? I am not trying to prove anything, I insisted. I just want to know who actually cares about me versus who sees me as a resource. Jennifer shook her head. I think you are going to hurt yourself more than anyone else with this, but I know that look. You have already decided. She was right. I had crafted my story meticulously. I would tell everyone that the accounting firm had suddenly closed after losing its biggest clients. I would say I needed $6,000 to cover rent and medical expenses until I found a new position. It was significant but not outrageous, and certainly not beyond the means of most family members. I compiled a list of everyone I would approach: my mother Susan and stepfather David, my father Robert and stepmother Patricia, my brother Kevin and his wife Sarah, my brother Tyler, my aunt Margaret, my aunt Barbara, and my cousin Brian. 10 people total, all of whom had turned to me for help at various points. The next day, I practiced my story with Jennifer, who reluctantly agreed to help despite her misgivings. You need to sound genuinely distressed, but not desperate, she advised. And have specific details ready about the company closing. I nodded, taking notes. I will say the partners had been mismanaging funds and the company is under investigation. That would explain why it happened so suddenly and why I might not get my final paycheck. And what about your job search? They will ask about that. I have been applying everywhere, but the job market is tight, especially for specialized tax positions. I have some interviews lined up but nothing definite yet, and my emergency fund is depleted from recent medical tests. I had thought through every detail, creating a scenario that would elicit sympathy without raising suspicion. As I finalized my plan, I felt guilt. Was Jennifer right? Was this manipulative? But then I remembered all the times I had emptied my savings to help these same people, often at great personal cost, and my resolve strengthened. I made predictions about how each person would respond. My mother would probably offer some help, but less than needed. My father would lecture me about financial responsibility. Kevin would claim he could not help due to the children's expenses. Tyler would say he had no money. David and Patricia would refuse outright. Aunt Barbara would judge me. Cousin Brian would promise help that never materialized. The only person I had hope for was Aunt Margaret. Despite having the least to give, she had always been the most generous. But even with her, I kept expectations low. $6,000 was substantial for a nurse living alone. With anticipation and dread, I picked up my phone and made the first call. It was time to discover who my real family was. I decided to call my mother first. Susan had always prided Herself on being nurturing, frequently reminding us how she had sacrificed for her children. If anyone would help, I thought it would be her. My hands trembled as I dialed. She answered on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Hi, Mom," I said, making my voice sound strained. "Rachel, is everything okay? You sound upset." I launched into my prepared story about the company closing, lost wages, and my precarious situation. As I spoke, I could hear her breathing change, growing concerned with each detail. "Oh, honey, that is terrible," she said when I finished. "Have you applied for unemployment? What about your emergency fund?" I explained that unemployment would take weeks and my emergency fund was depleted by recent medical tests for concerning symptoms. I did not specify what symptoms, letting her imagination fill the blanks. "I hate to ask this, Mom, but I need help. About $6,000 to cover rent and medical bills until I find something new. I promise I will pay you back as soon as I can." There was a long, uncomfortable pause. "Oh, Rachel, you know David and I just put a down payment on the lake house. We are pretty cash poor right now." Her voice took on a defensive tone. "Have you asked your father? Or Kevin? Sarah makes good money at the dental practice." I was hoping to avoid asking Dad, I said truthfully, "and Kevin has the children and their private school tuition." "Well, let me talk to David and see what we can do," she said finally. "But I cannot promise anything. You know how careful he is with money, especially when it comes to, well, you know." I did know. David had never considered me his responsibility. "Sure, Mom. Just let me know soon. The rent is due next week." After hanging up, I noted her response. She had expressed concern but immediately looked for ways to pass responsibility to someone else. The next day, I met my father for coffee. I chose a public place, thinking he might be less likely to react negatively. "You look tired," was his greeting as I sat down. I gave him a weak smile and launched into my story. His face remained impassive as I spoke. When I finished asking for help with $6,000, he leaned back and crossed his arms. "Rachel, I have always taught you about financial responsibility," he began, slipping into his lecturing voice. "This is exactly why I told you to keep 6 months of expenses saved." "What happened to that plan?" "Life happened, Dad," I replied. "Medical bills, car repairs. Not everyone can afford to set aside that much." He sighed heavily. "And now you expect others to bail you out. What about your spending habits? Do you really need that apartment in that neighborhood?" For 25 minutes, he lectured me about financial planning and living below one's means. Not once did he offer actual help. "I would love to help you, Rachel, but Patricia and I are focusing on retirement. We cannot afford to dip into those funds. It would be irresponsible." He patted my hand patronizingly. "This will be a good learning experience. Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom before we make necessary changes." I nodded, fighting back tears that were only partly for show. My brother Kevin was next. I drove to his beautiful suburban home on a Saturday afternoon. His wife Sarah was at work, giving us privacy. "Rachel, what a surprise," he exclaimed. "The children are at their activities. Come in." His house was immaculate, with expensive furniture and professional family photos everywhere. As we sat in his gourmet kitchen sipping coffee from his commercial-grade machine, I told him about my situation. "Oh my God, that is awful," he gasped, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "I cannot believe they would just close like that. Poor you." His sympathy seemed genuine, and for a moment I felt hopeful. Then I mentioned needing $6,000. "Oh," he said, his expression shifting. "Well, this is not a great time. We just bought the new BMW, and the children's tuition was due. Plus, we are redoing the master bathroom." He glanced around nervously. "Sarah handles most of our finances, and she is really strict about our budget." "I understand," I said quietly. "I would not ask if I was not desperate." I know, he said quickly. "Let me talk to Sarah and see what we can do. Maybe we can help with a smaller amount? Or maybe you could move in temporarily. The guest room is storage now, but we could clear it." I thanked him but explained that moving would be difficult with my job search. He promised to call after speaking with Sarah, but his avoidance of eye contact told me everything. My brother Tyler was perhaps the most disappointing. After sending him a detailed text about my situation, he responded with a brief message: "That sucks, sis. Really tight right now myself. Talk soon." He never did. My follow-up messages went unanswered, and calls went straight to voicemail. This from the same brother who had borrowed thousands from me over the years. My stepmother Patricia was blunt when I called her. "Rachel, I am sure this is difficult, but Robert and I are not in a position to help. Perhaps this is an opportunity to learn better financial management skills." When I reminded her that I had helped them with cabin repairs last year, she bristled. That was different. That was a family property that you also enjoy using. The fact that I had only been invited once in 3 years apparently did not matter. My stepfather David was even worse. You are not my daughter, he said plainly. I have supported your mother for years, but your financial problems are your own. Perhaps you should have chosen a more lucrative career. My cousin Brian initially seemed sympathetic, promising to definitely help out. He even suggested meeting for lunch to give me a check. But when the day came, he texted saying something had come up and he would reschedule. He never did and eventually stopped responding. Aunt Barbara's response was least surprising but still painful. Well, Rachel, I always said that company seemed unstable. I told your father you should have taken that bank job after college, but no one listens to me. She then told me about other family members' financial troubles and how they had overcome them without begging for handouts. By evening, I heard from Kevin that Aunt Barbara was telling everyone about my financial irresponsibility. After a week of rejections, half-promises, and silence, I was emotionally exhausted. The experiment had confirmed my worst fears about my family. 8 people who had repeatedly asked for and received my help could not or would not return the favor. Then my phone rang. It was Aunt Margaret. Rachel, honey, I just heard from your mother about the job. Are you okay? Her voice was warm with genuine concern. I had not reached out to Margaret yet, planning to call her next. The fact that she called me first spoke volumes. I am hanging in there, I said, the emotion now entirely real. Listen, I want to help. Can we meet for lunch tomorrow? My treat, of course. The next day, we met at a small diner near her apartment. Margaret looked exactly as always, silver-streaked hair in a ponytail, wearing scrubs and a cardigan with mismatched buttons. She hugged me tightly before we sat down. I am so sorry about your job, sweetheart. That company never deserved you. Anyway. As we ate, she asked thoughtful questions about my job search and offered to reach out to former colleagues with connections. Then, after our plates were cleared, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I want you to take this, she said, sliding it across the table. It is $4,000. I know it is not the full amount you need, but it should help with rent. I stared at the envelope in shock. Margaret, I cannot take this. This is too much. Nonsense. Family helps family. And I want you to know something else. She reached across and took my hand. If you need a place to stay to save on rent, my sofa pulls out. It is not fancy, but you are welcome as long as you need. Tears filled my eyes, completely genuine this time. Thank you, I whispered, overwhelmed by her generosity. Now, do not worry about paying this back right away, she continued. Get back on your feet first. Find a job you actually like this time. Life is too short to work somewhere that does not appreciate you. As we left the diner, Margaret hugged me again. You are going to be okay, Rachel. You are smart and capable. This is just a bump in the road. Driving home, I clutched the envelope containing $4,000, more than I knew Margaret could spare. The contrast between her response and everyone else's could not have been starker. The only person who offered genuine help was the one with the least to give. After meeting Margaret, I researched and was stunned. $4,000 represented nearly all her savings, and she had been quietly dealing with high blood pressure complications. Her medication costs had increased, and she had been picking up extra shifts to make ends meet. The knowledge hit me like a physical blow. Margaret, who had so little, had given me almost everything without hesitation. Meanwhile, my mother, who had recently spent $10,000 on a kitchen renovation, could not spare $6,000 to help her daughter. The next day, I invited Margaret for dinner. As she settled on my couch, I noticed how tired she looked. Margaret, I need to tell you something, I began, setting tea in front of her. I have not been completely honest with you. Her expression remained open, curious rather than concerned. What is it, honey? I did not lose my job. The company is fine. I still have my position. The words tumbled out quickly. I made up the story to see who in the family would help me if I needed it. Margaret was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. I see. Are you angry with me? I asked, afraid of losing the one genuine relationship I had discovered. She considered carefully. No, not angry. Sad, maybe, sad that you felt you needed to test people this way. She sipped her tea. But I understand why you did it. Our family has not always been kind to you. You were the only one who offered to help, I told her. Everyone else had excuses or ignored me entirely. Margaret sighed deeply. People show you who they are when giving becomes inconvenient. I learned that lesson the hard way myself. What do you mean? She set down her cup and folded her hands. My ex-husband, James. Did I ever tell you why we really divorced? I shook my head. The family story had always been vague. I came into a small inheritance when my grandmother died. About $40,000, not a fortune, but significant for us. James immediately had plans for the money, mainly investing in his friend's business ventures. She smiled ruefully. I wanted to save it for our future, maybe buy a house. We fought for months. What happened? One day, I discovered he had forged my signature and withdrawn most of the money. By the time I found out, it was gone, invested in a restaurant that failed within a year. She shook her head. When I confronted him, do you know what he said? That it was our money, not just mine, and he had as much right to it as I did. I was shocked. I had no idea. The family preferred the growing apart story. Less messy. She reached for my hand. The point is, I learned that some people see you as a resource rather than a person, and it is a painful lesson. I am so sorry that happened to you, I said, squeezing her hand. It was long ago, but it taught me something important about money and relationships. She looked at me intently. Money does not just reveal who others truly are, Rachel. It reveals who we are too. How we use it, how we share it, how we talk about it. It is a powerful mirror. Her words resonated deeply. In that moment, I made a decision. Margaret, there is something else I need to tell you. Something big. I took a deep breath. I won the lottery 3 weeks ago. $52 million. Her eyes widened, but she remained silent, waiting for me to continue. I have not told anyone else. Not my parents, not Kevin or Tyler, not even Jennifer. You are the first to know. Oh, Rachel, she breathed. That is life-changing. I know. And that is why I did this test. I needed to know who would be there for me without knowing about the money. Margaret nodded slowly. I understand that. But what will you do now? That is what I am trying to figure out. The money is secure, and I have good financial advisors. But I do not know how to handle the family. Margaret considered this. You know you do not owe anyone anything, Rachel. Not even me. But I want to help you, I insisted. Your medical expenses, a better apartment, whatever you need. She smiled gently. I do not need anything from you, sweetheart. I am happy with my life. My apartment is small, but it is full of things I love. My car runs most of the time. I have my patients and my books, and now this wonderful secret with my favorite niece. She patted my hand. Just knowing you are secure and happy would be enough for me. Her selflessness brought tears to my eyes. Here was someone who had given me almost everything she had when she thought I needed it, and now was asking for nothing in return when she knew I had millions. As we continued talking into the night, the contrast between Margaret and the rest of my family became even starker. While I had been conducting my experiment, word had spread about my supposed financial troubles. Instead of prompting concern, it had mainly generated gossip and judgment. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Heard you asked Kevin for money too. You should have told me you were asking everyone. Feels like you were playing us against each other. Another came from my father. Patricia tells me you have been calling everyone for handouts. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior I warned you about. The family had turned my request for help into evidence of my character flaws rather than an opportunity to show compassion. In doing so, they had revealed everything I needed to know about the true nature of our relationships. The morning after my conversation with Margaret, I met with Thomas to discuss my long-term plans. Now that I had clarity about my family relationships, I could make decisions about my future with open eyes. I want to set up a trust for my Aunt Margaret, I told him. Something that will cover her medical expenses and provide comfortable retirement, but in a way that feels like a gift rather than charity. She is very proud. Thomas nodded, making notes. We can structure it as a family trust that provides a monthly stipend. She would not have to manage a large sum all at once, which can be overwhelming for someone not used to wealth. Perfect. And I want to buy her a small house near wherever I decide to live. Nothing extravagant, just comfortable and accessible for someone with health issues. We spent the next hour discussing investment strategies, charitable foundations, and my own living situation. I had decided to give notice at my accounting job and focus on establishing a non-profit organization aimed at helping elderly people living alone, inspired by Margaret's situation. What about the rest of your family? Thomas asked cautiously. Do you plan to tell them about the winnings? I shook my head firmly. Not right now. Maybe not ever. But I do want to arrange a family meeting to clear the air about my financial troubles. Later that day, I called Jennifer and finally told her the complete truth about everything, the lottery win and the family experiment. After her initial shock, she understood why I had kept it secret. So what now? She asked. Are you going to become one of those eccentric millionaires who still clips coupons? I laughed. No, but I am not going to suddenly start buying luxury cars either. I want this money to mean something, to do good, starting with Margaret. She deserves it. Jennifer agreed. And what about everyone else? The ones who failed your test? I am still figuring that out. I have called a family meeting for this weekend. I told them I have an important announcement. When Sunday arrived, I was surprised to see everyone show up at my apartment. My mother and David, my father and Patricia, Kevin and Sarah, even Tyler, who had been ignoring my calls. Aunt Barbara arrived with a disapproving frown. Aunt Margaret came last, giving me a secret smile. As everyone settled into my living room, looking around with varying degrees of curiosity and judgment, I stood before them feeling strangely calm. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know there have been rumors about my financial situation, and I wanted to address them directly. My mother shifted uncomfortably. Tyler became interested in his phone. Kevin and Sarah exchanged glances. The truth is, I am fine. I have found a new job with better pay and benefits. This was technically true, as I had just appointed myself executive director of my new foundation with a modest salary. I will be transitioning to that position next month. Well, that is wonderful news, my mother said with obvious relief. We have all been so worried. I noticed several faces relax around the room. They had come expecting either to be asked for money again or perhaps to stage an intervention about my financial habits. Instead, they were getting good news that required nothing from them. So why all the drama about needing money? My father asked accusingly. Why ask everyone for help if you had a job lined up? I met his gaze steadily. The job came through recently, and when I was in trouble, I reached out to my family. That is what family is supposed to be for, right? An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Well, we all have our own financial commitments, Patricia said defensively. It is not always possible to help, even when we want to. Of course. I agreed. We all have to make choices about our priorities. I turned to Tyler. Speaking of which, Tyler, I noticed you never responded to my messages when I needed help. Yet you had no problem asking me for $3,000 last Christmas. For your rent. He had the grace to look embarrassed. I was going through some stuff, and I did not have any money to give you. You did not even call me back, I pointed out. That would have been free. I continued systematically. Kevin, you mentioned your budget constraints, but you found money for a new BMW and bathroom renovation. Dad, you lectured me about financial responsibility while you and Patricia went to Las Vegas after I helped with your truck repairs. The room grew increasingly uncomfortable as I addressed each person's response to my supposed crisis versus their own past requests for help. Patricia, you suggested I learn financial management, but you had no problem accepting my help with the cabin repairs. David, you reminded me I am not your daughter, yet you have never hesitated to benefit from my mother's financial support, which often came from money I lent her. Aunt Barbara bristled. Well, this seems like entrapment. You were testing us? I was discovering who cares about me as a person versus who sees me as a resource, I replied calmly. The results were quite revealing. This is manipulative, Kevin said. You lied to us. I did lie, I admitted. But my lie revealed your truth. When you thought I had nothing to give, none of you wanted to help. When you needed something from me, I was always available. Tyler finally looked up from his phone. So what, you are cutting us off now? Being all high and mighty? I am not cutting anyone off, I said. I am simply acknowledging what our relationships actually are rather than what I hoped they could be. My mother's voice took on a wheedling tone. Rachel, honey, you know we love you. Sometimes timing just does not work out for helping with money. Mom, the timing never works out when I need help. But it always works out when you need something from me. Do you see the pattern? Margaret spoke for the first time. Perhaps we should be grateful that Rachel is financially stable and can take care of herself. That is what we all want for our family members, is it not? Aunt Barbara shot her a look. Easy for you to say, Margaret. You gave her money, so now you are the saint. I gave what I could because I care about her well-being, Margaret replied simply. That is what family does. The meeting continued. For another 30 minutes, with various family members attempting to justify their responses or turn the blame back on me for conducting the test. No one apologized. No one acknowledged that their behavior had been hurtful or hypocritical. As they prepared to leave, my mother pulled me aside. I hope you are not going to hold grudges over this, Rachel. Family is family. You are right, Mom. Family is family. And real family shows up when you need them, not just when they need something. After everyone left except Margaret, we sat quietly for a moment. How do you feel? She asked. Lighter, I said honestly. For the first time, I see everyone clearly. It is sad, but also freeing. And now you know who your real family is, Margaret said, squeezing my hand. Over the following weeks, I noticed immediate changes in how family members interacted with me. Text messages became shorter and less frequent. Holiday invitations came with less enthusiasm. It was as if they sensed that I had shifted from being a resource to being a person with boundaries, and they were not sure how to navigate this new dynamic. Tyler stopped calling altogether. Kevin's interactions became politely distant. My parents maintained contact but with less warmth and more guardedness, as if they were afraid I might call them out on other behaviors. Only Margaret's relationship with me remained unchanged, warm, genuine, and based on mutual care rather than what we could do for each other. Meanwhile, I moved forward with my plans. I gave notice at my accounting job, citing a career change opportunity. Richard seemed surprised that someone as unremarkable as me had found something better. Stephen asked if I could finish his projects before leaving. I declined both his surprise and his request. With Thomas's help, I established the foundation I had described to my family. Golden Years Support Network would provide comprehensive assistance to elderly people living alone. Margaret agreed to serve as a consultant, allowing me to funnel support to her through professional channels that preserved her dignity. I purchased a modest but comfortable house in a quiet neighborhood and, 4 blocks away, bought Margaret a single-story home with wide doorways and accessible features. When I presented it as housing provided for our senior consultant, she accepted. With tears of gratitude, Jennifer joined our organization as outreach coordinator, bringing her healthcare expertise to our mission. Together, we developed programs addressing not just financial needs but social isolation and health challenges facing seniors. As we worked to establish the foundation, I reflected on how the lottery win had revealed truths I might never have discovered otherwise. The money had not changed anyone's character. It had simply provided a lens through which to see who people really were. Margaret had always been generous and caring. My parents had always been conditional in their love. My brothers had always been takers rather than givers. The lottery test had just made these patterns impossible to ignore or rationalize away. For the first time in my adult life, I felt free to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. It was a gift more valuable than any amount of money. 6 months after the family confrontation, my life had transformed completely. The Golden Years Support Network was thriving beyond my expectations. We had helped over 150 seniors in our first 6 months. Providing everything from grocery delivery to home repairs to medical bill assistance. Margaret had officially retired from nursing and embraced her role as our senior consultant. Her new house was perfect for her needs, with a garden she tended lovingly and a kitchen where she experimented with recipes she shared with our clients. Her health had improved dramatically with better medical care and reduced financial stress. "I never thought I would live somewhere this beautiful," she told me one evening as we sat on her porch watching the sunset. "But more than that, I never thought I would feel this useful and valued in my retirement." Jennifer had proven to be an exceptional addition to our team. Her medical background helped us identify health issues among our clients that might otherwise go unnoticed. She coordinated with local doctors and social services to ensure comprehensive care for everyone we served. "This work is so much more fulfilling than my previous job," Jennifer confided during one of our planning meetings. "We are not just treating symptoms, we are addressing root causes of isolation and neglect." As for my family relationships, they had settled into a new equilibrium that was both distant and honest. My parents maintained polite contact, calling on birthdays and major holidays, but the warmth had disappeared from our interactions. They seemed uncertain how to relate to me. Now that I was no longer the family safety net, Tyler had completely disappeared from my life. He stopped calling, stopped texting, and did not attend family gatherings. I heard through Kevin that he had moved to another state, supposedly for a new job opportunity. I suspected he was avoiding facing me after his complete abandonment during my supposed crisis. Kevin maintained surface-level contact but with visible discomfort. Our conversations were stilted and brief, focused on safe topics like weather and work. Sarah was equally distant, and I was no longer invited to their children's birthday parties or school events. My father and Patricia continued their lecturing habits whenever we spoke, but now their advice fell on deaf ears. They could no longer use my financial struggles as evidence of poor decision-making, since I appeared to be thriving in my new career. This seemed to frustrate them more than support them. David remained coldly polite when we encountered each other at family events, but his earlier dismissal of me as not his daughter had created a permanent chill in our interactions that neither of us attempted to bridge. Aunt Barbara had become even more critical, suggesting that my newfound success had made me uppity and too good for the family. She made pointed comments about people who thought they were better than others and how money changed people's personalities. Only Margaret's relationship with me had deepened and strengthened. We had dinner together twice a week, shared holidays, and talked regularly about everything from current events to childhood memories. She had become the mother figure I had always needed but never had. One evening, as we sat in my living room planning a new program for the foundation. Margaret looked up from her notes. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "Of course. You can ask me anything. Do you ever regret conducting that test? Do you think things might have been different if you had just told everyone about the lottery win from the beginning?" I considered her question carefully. "I think about that sometimes," I admitted. "But honestly, I think the test revealed who people really were rather than changing them. The money would have brought out the same character traits, just in different ways." "What do you mean?" "Tyler would have asked for larger amounts and felt entitled to them. Kevin would have calculated exactly how much he thought he deserved based on being my brother. My parents would have tried to control how I spent the money. Everyone would have had opinions and expectations about what I owed them." Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "And you would never have known if their sudden attention was genuine or motivated by greed." "Exactly. This way, I discovered who really cared about me before money entered the equation. It was painful, but it was honest." As our first year of operation concluded, I reflected on the choices I had made and their consequences. The foundation had grown to serve over 300 clients. We had expanded our services to include transportation assistance, technology training, and social events that brought isolated seniors together. Margaret had become something of a local celebrity, featured in a newspaper article about our work. The reporter described her as a retired nurse who has found new purpose in helping others navigate the challenges of aging with dignity and support. Jennifer had been promoted to program director and was developing training materials that other cities could use to replicate our model. Her engagement to Mark, a volunteer coordinator she had met through our work, was announced in the spring. I was genuinely excited to be part of a wedding celebration that would be filled with people who valued authentic relationships. My own living situation had stabilized beautifully. My house was comfortable without being ostentatious, furnished with pieces I had chosen for comfort and meaning rather than status. I had a garden where I grew vegetables that I shared with neighbors and clients. My life was simple but rich in ways that had nothing to do with money. The lottery money continued to grow under Thomas's careful management, but it no longer dominated my thoughts. It had become a tool for creating positive change rather than a burden or a secret I carried alone. I had established anonymous scholarship funds at local colleges for students studying nursing and social work. I contributed to medical research focused on diseases affecting the elderly. I supported local food banks and housing assistance programs. The money was working to solve problems rather than sitting idle or creating new ones. Sometimes I encountered family members in public. These meetings were polite but brief. Kevin and I exchanged pleasantries at the grocery store. My mother and I chatted briefly at the post office. My father nodded acknowledgement when we passed on the street. None of these encounters were hostile, but they lacked the warmth and connection that genuine family relationships should have. It was as if we were all playing roles we had learned rather than expressing authentic feelings. The saddest part was not my own loss of these relationships, but the realization that they had never been as real as I had believed. I had spent years trying to maintain connections that were fundamentally one-sided, investing emotional energy in people who saw me as a resource rather than a person they genuinely cared about, but the liberation that came from this understanding was profound. I no longer felt guilty about setting boundaries. I no longer worried about disappointing people who had repeatedly disappointed me. I no longer tried to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it freely. Instead, I focused on nurturing the relationships that were genuinely reciprocal and meaningful. Margaret and Jennifer had become my chosen family, and our bonds were stronger than any biological connection I had ever experienced. As I sat in my garden one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, I felt a peace I had never known before. The lottery had given me financial freedom, but the test had given me something even more valuable, emotional freedom. 2 years after winning the lottery, my life had achieved a balance I never thought possible. The Golden Years Support Network had expanded to 3 cities, helping over 800 seniors annually. We had been featured in national media as a model for community-based elder care, and other organizations were reaching out to learn from our approach. Margaret had become the heart and soul of our operation. At 71, she worked 4 days a week, mentoring new volunteers and developing programs based on her decades of healthcare experience. Her transformation from a struggling nurse to a respected community leader was remarkable to witness. "Sometimes I feel like my real life didn't start until I was 70, she told me during one of our regular dinner conversations. "All those years I spent just surviving, and now I'm finally thriving." Jennifer's wedding to Mark had been a beautiful celebration of authentic love and commitment. As her maid of honor, I had given a speech about the importance of choosing family based on love rather than obligation. Many of our foundation colleagues and clients attended, creating a warm community atmosphere that felt more like real family than any biological family gathering I had ever experienced. The work continued to evolve and expand. We had added a technology training program to help seniors stay connected with distant family members. Our home repair service had grown to include a team of skilled volunteers who could handle everything from changing light bulbs to major accessibility modifications. Our meal delivery program ensured that no client went hungry, especially important for those with mobility issues or transportation challenges. What remained most meaningful to me was the individual relationships we built with each client. Mrs. Henderson, 93 and living alone after her husband's death, had become like a grandmother to me. She shared stories of her childhood during the Depression and taught me to knit scarves that we donated to homeless shelters. Mr. Rodriguez, 88 and estranged from his children after a bitter divorce decades earlier, had found new purpose. Volunteering at the local library reading to children. His loneliness had transformed into joy as he discovered that family could be created as well as inherited. These relationships reminded me daily why the work mattered and why my lottery win had been directed towards something meaningful rather than personal luxury. My relationship with my biological family had settled into a pattern of distant politeness. We exchanged holiday cards and brief phone calls on birthdays, but there was no real substance to these interactions. They felt obligatory rather than loving, performed because society expected family connections rather than because anyone genuinely missed my presence in their lives. However, I had begun providing anonymous assistance when family members faced genuine crises. When my father suffered a mild heart attack and faced unexpected medical bills that strained his fixed income, I quietly arranged for the hospital's financial assistance program to cover his costs. He never knew the donation had come from me, and I preferred it that way. When cousin Brian finally entered a legitimate rehabilitation program for his gambling addiction, I made sure the treatment costs were covered through an anonymous charitable contribution. His recovery was rocky, with several relapses, but he eventually achieved stability and found work as a counselor helping others with addiction issues. Even Tyler, who had completely cut contact with the family, received help when I learned through Kevin that he was struggling with unemployment in his new city. An anonymous job placement service helped him find steady work in construction, utilizing the skills he had developed during his various career attempts. These interventions satisfied my sense of family obligation without requiring me to rebuild relationships that had proven to be fundamentally unhealthy. I could help when truly needed while maintaining the boundaries that protected my emotional well-being. My mother occasionally made comments suggesting she suspected I was doing better financially than my nonprofit salary would indicate, but she never asked direct questions. Perhaps she preferred not to know the details, especially given how she had responded when I supposedly needed help. Kevin and Sarah's marriage had gone through some difficult periods, possibly related to financial stress and the pressure of maintaining their expensive lifestyle. I heard through family gossip that they had considered selling their house and moving to a less expensive neighborhood. Part of me wanted to help, but I remembered how quickly Kevin had dismissed my supposed crisis, and I maintained my boundaries. The most challenging situation arose when Tyler's ex-girlfriend contacted me through social media, claiming he owed her money and asking if I knew how to reach him. I realized that Tyler's disappearance from our family had left him isolated and potentially vulnerable to his own poor financial decisions. Through discreet investigation, I learned he was actually doing well in his new location and had paid his debts responsibly. His avoidance of the family seemed to be helping him make better choices. As our foundation entered its third year, we received a significant grant from the state to expand our services to rural areas where elderly isolation was an even greater problem. This recognition validated our approach and provided resources to help hundreds more seniors. Margaret and I traveled to these rural communities to assess needs and establish local partnerships. During one trip, she reflected on how different her life might have been if she had moved away from family drama earlier in her life. I spent so many years trying to maintain relationships that drained my energy, she said as we drove through farmland toward a small town where we would be meeting with local officials. I thought loyalty meant accepting whatever treatment family members offered, even when it was harmful. What changed your mind? I asked. Watching you set boundaries. She said simply. You showed me that love doesn't require accepting mistreatment. Real love respects limits and encourages growth. This conversation reminded me that the impact of my lottery test extended beyond my own family dynamics. Margaret had learned from my example that she could expect better treatment from people who claimed to care about her. She had become more selective about how she spent her time and energy, focusing on relationships that were genuinely reciprocal. The ripple effects of choosing authentic relationships over obligatory ones had created positive changes not just in my life, but in the lives of everyone connected to our foundation. Volunteers learned to value their contributions and expect appreciation. Clients learned to advocate for their needs rather than accepting neglect. Staff members created a work environment based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy and exploitation. By the end of our third year, I realized that the lottery money had been a catalyst rather than an end goal. It had provided the resources to test relationships, establish boundaries, and create something meaningful. But the real transformation had been learning to value myself enough to require genuine care from others and to offer the same in return. I prepared to attend our annual volunteer appreciation dinner. I felt grateful not just for the financial security the lottery had provided, but for the wisdom that had come from understanding the difference between transactional relationships and authentic love. 3 years after that life-changing Wednesday, I stood before a room filled with 200 volunteers, staff members, and clients celebrating our foundation's third anniversary. The Golden Years Support Network now operated in 5 cities, employed 32 full-time staff members, and had helped over 1,500 elderly clients. What had started as a way to honor Margaret's kindness had become a model for community-based senior support across the region. When we started this foundation, I told the gathered crowd, we believed that everyone deserves to age with dignity, connection, and support. Tonight, as I look around this room, I see proof that communities can come together to make that belief a reality. The applause was warm and genuine, but what moved me most was seeing Margaret at a table near the front, surrounded by former clients whose lives she had touched. At 74, she had become something of a local celebrity, featured in magazine articles about successful aging and community engagement. Jennifer and Mark were at the same table, their 6-month-old marriage glowing with the happiness that comes from building a life based on shared values and genuine partnership. Jennifer had recently been promoted to regional director, overseeing our expansion into new communities while maintaining the personal touch that made our services so effective. During the dinner, several clients spoke about how our programs had changed their lives. Mrs. Patterson, 89, described how our technology training had allowed her to video call her grandchildren across the country. Mr. Williams, 92, explained how our home repair service had made it possible for him to remain in the house where he and his late wife had raised their children. These stories reminded me why the work mattered so much. We were not just providing services, we were preserving dignity and independence for people who had contributed to their communities for decades and deserved better than neglect in their final years. After the formal program ended, Margaret and I found a quiet corner to talk. Can you believe how far we have come? She asked, her eyes bright with satisfaction and joy. Sometimes it feels surreal, I admitted. 3 years ago, I was a struggling accountant with a dysfunctional family. Now I am running a foundation that actually makes a difference. The foundation is wonderful, Margaret said, but what I am most proud of is how you have grown as a person. You learned to value yourself enough to require authentic relationships, and that courage has inspired others to do the same. She was right. The ripple effects of my decision to test family loyalty had extended far beyond my own relationships. Volunteers often told me that working with our foundation had helped them recognize toxic patterns in their own families and friendships. Staff members had learned to set boundaries with demanding relatives who had previously exploited their kindness. One volunteer, Sarah Chen, had shared during a team meeting that watching me maintain professional relationships with family members who had disappointed me had given her permission to limit contact with an abusive brother. I thought family meant accepting whatever treatment they offered, she had said. But seeing how you handled your situation showed me that love should include respect. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I reflected on how different my life looked compared to 3 years earlier. My relationship with money had fundamentally changed. The lottery winnings had grown substantially under Thomas's management, but wealth no longer felt like a burden or a secret I carried alone. Instead, money had become a tool for creating positive change. Beyond the foundation, I had established scholarship funds for students studying geriatrics and social work. I supported medical research focused on Alzheimer's disease and other conditions affecting the elderly. I contributed to food banks and housing assistance programs throughout the region. The anonymous help I provided to family members when they faced genuine crises had continued, but always with careful boundaries. When Kevin and Sarah had seriously considered divorce due to financial stress, an anonymous marriage counseling fund had covered their therapy costs. They had worked through their issues and emerged with a stronger relationship, though they never knew the source of the assistance. Tyler had actually reached out to me 6 months earlier, the first contact we had had since the family meeting. He had called to apologize for his behavior during my supposed crisis and to let me know he was doing well in his new city. His gambling addiction was under control, and he had found steady work and a healthy relationship. I know I messed up, he had said during that conversation. I was so caught up in my own problems that I couldn't see past them when you needed help. I am sorry for that. I had accepted his apology and wished him well, but I did not invite him back into my life in Any significan bye. His acknowledgement of wrongdoing was appreciated, but it did not erase the pattern of behavior that had characterized our relationship for decades. My parents had maintained their distance, though my mother occasionally made comments suggesting she was curious about my improved circumstances. During our brief holiday phone calls, she would mention seeing articles about the foundation and express pride in my work, but there was an underlying tension that suggested she knew more about my situation than she was willing to discuss directly. The most significant change in family dynamics had come from an unexpected source. My cousin Brian, now 2 years into recovery from gambling addiction, had become genuinely interested in the foundation's work. He had volunteered for our financial literacy programs, helping seniors avoid scams and manage fixed incomes more effectively. His transformation from entitled gambler to dedicated volunteer had been remarkable to witness. During one of our program planning meetings, he had pulled me aside to express gratitude for the anonymous help he had received during his rehabilitation. "I know it was you," he said quietly. "No one else in the family would have cared enough to help without making it a big drama. That assistance saved my life, and I want you to know I will never forget it." I had neither confirmed nor denied his suspicion, but his gratitude was touching and his commitment to the foundation's mission was genuine. As Margaret and I drove home from the anniversary celebration, she reflected on the evening's presentations and the growth we had witnessed in both the foundation and ourselves. "You know what strikes me most about tonight," she said. "Everyone in that room has learned that they deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. That is the real gift of your lottery win, not the money itself, but the wisdom to recognize authentic love and the courage to build a life around it." Her words resonated deeply as I considered the journey that had brought us to this point. The lottery test had been painful but necessary, revealing truths about family relationships that might have remained hidden for years. That knowledge had freed me to create chosen family bonds that were stronger and more meaningful than any biological connection I had ever experienced. As we pulled into Margaret's driveway, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the path my life had taken. The lottery money had provided security and opportunity, but the real prize had been learning to distinguish between people who loved me and people who simply wanted something from me. Today, as I write this story 5 years after those 6 life-changing numbers appeared on my lottery ticket, I am sitting in the garden behind my home, watching Margaret tend to her roses in the yard next door. At 75, she moves more slowly than she once did, but her spirit remains vibrant and her commitment to helping others stronger than ever. The Golden Years Support Network has continued to grow, now operating in 8 cities and serving over 2,000 seniors annually. We have been recognized by state and federal agencies as a model for community-based elder care, and our training programs are being implemented across the country. More importantly, we have created a community where aging is viewed not as a burden to be endured but as a continuation of purposeful living. Our clients volunteer at schools, mentor young adults, and share their wisdom with anyone willing to listen. They have learned that their value extends far beyond what they can contribute financially or physically. Margaret recently celebrated her 75th birthday with a party attended by over 100 people whose lives she has touched through our foundation. Watching her blow out candles surrounded by genuine love and appreciation was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. This is what real family looks like, people who choose to care for each other because of love, not obligation. Jennifer and Mark are expecting their first child this fall, and they have asked Margaret and me to serve as honorary grandparents. The baby will grow up surrounded by chosen family who understand that love is demonstrated through actions rather than words, through presence rather than promises. My relationship with my biological family has settled into a pattern that works for everyone involved. We maintain polite contact through holiday cards and occasional phone calls, but without the pretense of closeness that once made every interaction painful and complicated. My mother still makes subtle hints about my improved financial situation, but she has never asked direct questions about how I can afford my lifestyle on a nonprofit salary. Perhaps she suspects the truth, or perhaps she prefers not to know. Either way, we have found a way to coexist without the emotional manipulation that once characterized our relationship. Kevin and Sarah have rebuilt their marriage and seem genuinely happy together. Their financial stress decreased significantly after Kevin received an unexpected promotion at work, a position I may have quietly influenced through anonymous recommendations to his employer. Their children are thriving, and while I am not involved in their daily lives, I occasionally receive updates through mutual acquaintances that suggest they are raising thoughtful, grounded kids. Tyler has remained in his new city and continued to build a stable life for himself. He sends me a card every Christmas with brief updates about his job and his girlfriend, maintaining the connection without overstepping the boundaries we established. His recovery from gambling addiction appears to be solid, and I am genuinely happy for his progress. Even my father and Patricia have mellowed somewhat with age. They still offer unsolicited advice during our rare conversations, but without the harsh judgment that once made their criticisms so hurtful. Their financial security in retirement was enhanced by anonymous assistance that helped them pay off their mortgage early, though they attribute their good fortune to careful planning rather than external help. The anonymous aid I have provided to family members over the years has taught me that it is possible to care about people's well-being without subjecting myself to their toxic behavior patterns. I can help when genuinely needed while maintaining the emotional boundaries that protect my peace of mind. Brian has become a success story that validates our foundation's approach to second chances. His work with our financial literacy programs has helped dozens of seniors avoid scams and manage their resources more effectively. His personal experience with addiction allows him to recognize vulnerability in others and offer support without judgment. "You taught me that recovery means more than just stopping destructive behavior," he told me recently. "It means learning to contribute positively to other people's lives. This work has given me purpose I never had before. The most profound change in my life has been learning to value myself enough to require authentic relationships. I no longer try to earn love through sacrifice or accept mistreatment because someone shares my DNA. Instead, I have built a chosen family based on mutual respect, genuine care, and shared values." This transformation has influenced every aspect of my life. In professional relationships, I expect to be treated with dignity and contribute my skills without accepting credit theft or exploitation. In friendships, I invest time and energy in people who reciprocate rather than those who only contact me when they need something. The foundation continues to evolve and expand, but its core mission remains the same: ensuring that everyone has access to the love, support, and respect they deserve, regardless of their family circumstances or financial resources. We have proven that authentic community can be created when people commit to caring for each other genuinely. Money, I have learned, is indeed a powerful revealer of character, but it is also a tool that can be used to create positive change when guided by clear values and genuine compassion. The lottery jackpot gave me financial security beyond my wildest dreams, but the real prize was the wisdom to distinguish between transactional relationships and authentic love. As I watch Margaret deadhead her roses while humming softly to herself, I think about the journey that brought us both to this peaceful moment. She gave me everything she had when she thought I needed it, and in return, I have been able to ensure that her golden years are filled with purpose, security, and love. The test I conducted was unconventional and perhaps morally questionable, but it provided invaluable clarity that has shaped every important decision since. It taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set firm boundaries, even when doing so feels harsh or selfish to people who are accustomed to taking advantage of your generosity. Most importantly, it showed me that the people who deserve a place in your life are not those who are there when you have everything to give, but those who stay when you have nothing to offer but yourself. Have you ever had to test someone's loyalty in your life? What did you learn from that experience? Share your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more real-life lessons that might change your perspective. Remember to share this video with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not determined by what they can give to others. Thank you for listening, and may you find the clarity to recognize the true relationships in your own life.